welcome to another coaching call. Really excited to get this one going. What we're going to be doing on this call is really just expanding on the call that we had last week with Monty, where he was going over some really key important financial KPIs and how to analyze your financials and profitability for each of the different services that you have. So let's jump right into it. And it looks like you're, Julie, if you could mute, perfect. Okay. So just tying back to last week, one important thing that Monty covered was how to look at profitability. And one thing that we've come across several times when working with different accounts is how people classify different transactions, mainly expenses on their financials. So it's really important from a financial statement perspective to make sure that you're looking at sales, the direct cost tied to that. So breaking down like your fixed expenses versus your variable ones. And that's really the best way to look at profitability. And the same thing is applicable at the service level. So one thing that he also covered, and this is something that I would highly recommend for everybody to do, is at least to take like your top 5, top 10 best performing services and to do this calculation here where you're looking at figuring out what the gross profit margin is. And this is something that, personally, something that we've been using for many years. And this is something called managerial accounting. If you guys don't know, I'm an accountant by trade, and hands down, the managerial accounting class that I took, like it's still applicable to this day. So definitely something that I would highly recommend for you to do. And that's actually something that we start off with whenever we take on a new academy client, is to start digging into profitability at the service level to really understand not only what services have been driving the most revenue on the front end from the campaigns, but also which services are having the biggest impact on the bottom line. So this is just the basic template that we use, where we very similar approach to how Monty has it set up. We have our average purchase price at the top here. We have our direct costs for consumables and cost of goods sold. Then we look at any, if it's a device that we're using to provide this treatment, we're going to look at how much time was spent and the cost associated with using that device for that specific treatment. And another really important expense is, of course, labor or your cost of time. So what I'm probably going to do is I'll send you over, or I'll have the team send over this template in case you guys don't have something already done and prepared. And again, highly recommend for you to at least start looking at your top 5, top 10 services and doing this calculation, putting together these estimates. So that is one thing that's really important to consider. Now, another thing that I wanted to also cover is how we analyze your marketing and sales data. So on this next tab here, so I've pretty much cleaned a lot of the different data points that we analyze. So just so you guys know, from a sales standpoint, there's 8 different KPIs that we look at. From a marketing standpoint, there's 7 different KPIs that we look at when analyzing an account. But for the purpose of this presentation, really just wanted to focus on the most important ones. And also, this is something that I would highly recommend for you to do internally as well, because this does tie to this profitability analysis here, and I'll show you how. So first things first, very important, of course, knowing how many leads we've gotten for all the different services, how much marketing dollars we put towards generating those leads. And one of the most important KPIs from a marketing standpoint is the cost to generate a lead. Now, the next thing that we'll look at, and this is coming from your dashboard, is how many opportunities were converted. And another important piece, and this is why it's so important to make sure that we're actively updating the revenues and any one opportunity, is because that is how we're able to determine not only which campaigns are performing the best from a marketing standpoint, but which ones are performing the best from a revenue standpoint, which of course is even more important. It's great to get a ton of leads, but if they're not converting, if they're not generating enough revenue, it's going to be a waste of resources. So that's why it's super, super important to try and be on top of that dashboard, because we do look at revenue every single week. We go through each account and figure out how much revenue was generated. We look at our targets, and that's how we're able to identify clients that are at risk versus clients that are on track. So that is a very important KPI that we pay attention to. And these two here, this comes from the data that we collect from the dashboard and from the marketing campaigns. And what we're looking at here is the average revenue or purchase price or average purchase that somebody would make on their first visit. So on average for service A, somebody's going to spend around $372. And then you'll see here CPW, this is cost per one. And this is basically your patient acquisition cost from a marketing standpoint. And what this is telling us is for service number one, every time that we pay, for example, Facebook or Google, $73, we'll get a patient in return. And then from there, that's how we can look at profitability from a marketing standpoint, which is another KPI that we look at. But those are hands down like the most important metrics that I'd be paying attention to if you're running other marketing campaigns, other paid strategies. But ultimately, all of the information that we just covered is something that we're able to have access to. And another really, really important piece to the puzzle is not just understanding the impact of these campaigns on front-end revenue. So in other words, during their first visit, we also look into total revenue generated since those patients have came in for their first treatment. Now, this is something that we've been doing with our academy clients, mainly because we start getting deeper into their books and their financials and of course, all of their sales data. But without a doubt, knowing front-end revenue and profitability is really, really important. But to get like the full big picture, understanding total revenue generated from those campaigns, front-end and back-end, is really, really important as well. Because, and this is just me making an extreme example, we could actually have like on the front end, a campaign that is not performing well, and we're actually losing money whenever we generate a new patient. But in the long run, it could end up being the most profitable one because it might bring in the best type of patient for your practice. So this is where like we'd have to put all these pieces together to truly be able to determine what is the best approach to take in terms of budget allocation for all the different services that you're promoting. But without a doubt, at least understanding this front-end component is really one of the most important pieces to navigate like the weeks and the days that go by as we're running these campaigns. So far we've spoken about like profitability estimates here. So all of these are estimates. And right here, we've kind of calculated the actual data. And this is something that I highly recommend for you guys to do. Just pull out, your sales report and understand like what's the average purchase for somebody coming in, for example, for Morpheus versus somebody coming in for Botox. Those are two really important, those are really important data points to be able to compare what your estimates look like to your actuals. So this is where we'll take it one step further. And we've been doing this with our academy clients just for right now, but we take it one step further by looking at profitability for all the different services that we're promoting. So in this document here, very, very similar to what we had taken a look at in this estimates calculation, we're basically extrapolating these estimates to the actual marketing and sales results that we got from our campaign to really determine which campaigns are the most profitable during that first initial visit or treatment. And this is another really important piece, and this is why it's so important to have a good idea on your direct costs for each different treatments that you provide is because it might look profitable from just a regular, like on a standalone basis without including any of the marketing costs, but a really important direct cost associated with providing these treatments if you are investing in marketing is obviously your patient acquisition cost, which is something that will add. As you can see, it's not something that we had initially included here, but to me, this is another direct cost that's associated with being able to generate this revenue. And that is why we also account for the marketing costs associated with converting a patient for service 1 or service 2, and so on and so forth. So that is really what I wanted to cover. Wanted to keep this sweet and short and really just focus at least on one thing that you could take and apply as quickly as possible if you haven't already. And that would be to at least start by putting together this profitability estimate assessment. And then from there, I would highly, highly recommend for you to go and look at the actual data by looking at all your sales transactions, looking at your financials. If you're doing forecasts, budgets, it's a really good time to compare those actuals to projections. But ultimately, this is hands down one of the most important things that I would recommend any practice owner to pay attention to is how profitable they are at the service level, and not just grouping up revenues and expenses and looking at profitability as just like one number. So that pretty much covers it with everything that I wanted to go over. And like I said, we'll find a way to include at least a template for this